Welcome everyone to the very first inaugural session of Scribe's Journey with the Three Scribes. I am Travis J. Crokin, the calm scribe, and I am joined with my fellow scribes who will introduce themselves now.
I'm LJ Stanton, the pedantic scribe.
And I am TR Albee, the oddball scribe.
Thank you both for being here, for agreeing to do this. The Scribe's Journey with the Three Scribes is a writing podcast where we'll be discussing the different aspects of writing, from marketing, from actually putting words down on the paper, editing, finding editors, avoiding predatory publishing houses, all of these other things that come up, and how to enter contests and things like that. So to get started with this, let's talk a little bit about what we are currently working on. So Ted, you were just talking about first pages and first lines of writing a kid's story, and you're working on a kid's book and a podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on right now?
Yeah, sure. I guess the creative flow for how I started writing these podcasts and these kids' books came from a bedtime story I was telling my son. I was short. It was about a dragon and mouse, and they wanted to go on a picnic, but the mouse couldn't fly, and because it doesn't have any wings, so the dragon picked him up and they went on a picnic. But it kind of expanded into this giant steampunk universe. I started writing a handful of picture books. I have about 2 of the 5 finished. I realized that the artwork is very expensive. What would be probably a good idea is to start on something that would be less art focused and more story focused. And I can totally talk about picture books and the art focus later time because I will ramble on and someone will have to stop me. But currently I'm actually about 2,000 words away from finishing my first mid-grade novel. It's in the same universe that I'm working on in the steampunk universe, which is an alternate Earth in that the picture books were in. And it's like you said, Travis, I'm going to produce this into a free podcast for parents to listen to with their kids, and also publish this as an audiobook and a mid-grade novel, first of a series. So I'm excited. Almost done.
Yay!
I'm ready to roll. I know.
That is so exciting, almost being done the first draft. And audiobooks is something I need to look into more. They're becoming more and more of a thing. They used to be kind of a couple of houses that were doing audiobooks, and now they're becoming just massive repertoires for writers. If there's some writers I know that audiobooks make up 50% of their income that they've got coming in. But I have to ask you, as we all know, that generally in a story, the character is in a different place at the end than they are from the beginning. So without giving away a spoiler, does the mouse get wings at the end of the story?
Well, okay, so let me step back here in a sec. So the bedtime story that I told my son, I actually turned into a picture book, and I wrote that. And he's an inventor, so he actually kind of does get wings. So yes, to answer your question, in the picture book that I wrote based on the bedtime story, he does kind of get wings in his own way. He's a bit crafty.
LJ, what do you have in the fire right now?
Oh boy. Well, obviously working with you guys here, and that is in addition to I co-own the indie publishing house Sword and Board LLC, and I am also working on the sequel to the book that I published last year called The Dying Sun. It's the first book in a series. It's called The Gods Chronicle, that is set in a high fantasy world. Kind of think Game of Thrones. So if you're a little bit squeamish, it's not going to be the series for you. It takes place in a continent that is similar to the Middle East, Africa, and Asia if it was a giant supercontinent. And it is a story dealing with a religious civil war going on. And that is where it all starts.
That's something that I still haven't picked up a copy of the book. I'll admit, I feel very bad about that. I definitely am going to make it one of the next books I buy because it sounds very fascinating. And that's how a lot of the religions really kind of started. There was a period where there was a lot of religions and this massive war broke out, and only a few rose to the top and stayed at the top that way.
Exactly. So for this one, it is that we've had a monotheistic religion that has been here on the continent for 900 years, and then suddenly these priestesses show up saying that they are from the old gods and that they have a message and a mission, and then everything just explodes from there.
Now that's an exciting incident if I've ever heard one.
Yes.
What gave you the inspiration for that?
I have always been very passionate about mythology, especially Egyptian mythology. And then it went a little bit back into Roman and Greek mythology because of course, that's what we all study in school. And then as I grew up, I just became more and more fascinated with the Middle East as just a location and the cultures that are there and the rich diversity of people in that corner of the world. And the fact, too, that I've always loved fantasy. It's just been my absolute favorite ever since, I could get my hands on and understand Lord of the Rings. That was my jam. But it is a little bit boring after a while because you get these really European models and it's always kind of the same group of people who look very similar, doing very similar things in similar settings. And I wanted to break out from that. And it's been really exciting actually to see how there's been an update, I would say, in the industry with more and more books like this coming out with more diverse settings.
And I think having more diverse settings in the fantasy world may help the production and sale of fantasy in other countries, because I find fantasies tend to be a very heavily westernized thing, or at least Western fantasies do really well in Western cultures. But it'd be nice to kind of break open that market a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one lady that I am so excited to get my book into her hands because she took one look at it and did I want to read this. And she is in Lebanon. So it has been quite a journey that this book has taken to try and get to her. But I think it's arriving this week. And I shipped it to her in May. So
well, that's awesome.
Wow.
I'm really excited to get her opinion on everything.
That is fantastic. And then have her blow it up through Lebanon and get everyone else reading it.
Here's hoping.
That's quite the time to get the book there. So for myself, I do a lot of different things, and I work with plotters, so I do a lot of outlining and working with outlining and plot points and things like that. And I really get into the guts of storytelling, and which is fantastic. I find having a job that allows you to focus on your passion and what you do is a great way of doing things. So the story that I'm working on currently is sci-fi, which is, I haven't written a sci-fi novel before. I've done thrillers and mysteries and kids books in the past. The book I'm working on is called The Lion of Archinomus, and it is set more than 1,000 years in the future, in the year 3136. And the main premise behind it is there's a group of aliens called the Septrifides who have been monitoring the human species for the past 250,000 years. That's what they do, is they go through the universe and they find an intelligent species that's burgeoning and follow them till they hit a certain level of intelligence. And then they start working with them to increase their technological capabilities so that they can go through the world or through the universe and help continue the work that they're doing. Unfortunately, because humans have this thing that everything we come across, we have to put into our mouths and eat. The major crisis in this is that one of the top chefs in the world decides he wants to be the first one to cook and serve alien flesh. So one of the aliens ends up getting murdered, and that kind of sours the relationship and the agreement that they have.
I love that as a premise because, we are really bad about looking at something being like, I should put that in my mouth.
Yeah, everything. And we think everything is edible.
That is. And that's actually how I got the idea. Was I was sitting there in the shower one day and I thought, if we did finally make contact with aliens and had a proper communication with them, how long would it take before one of us tried to eat them? And I don't think
shower thoughts are amazing for getting productivity done.
They absolutely are. I love shower thoughts. And the funny thing is, I've actually got religion tied into my story as well, because the aliens are waiting for they wait for the species to pass what they call the God barrier. And that is, so long as the species, human or otherwise, believe that they are created specifically by a greater being, then they're not willing or able to host or meet another alien species of a higher intellect, because that challenges everything they believe. If I'm special and I'm unique, where is this coming from? So they wait until the God barrier religion has kind of broken down within the planet, and then they enter in and try to interact with the species. But religion still is factored in. There is still a religion there because humans realize that getting rid of religion altogether was not effective. There's a certain aspect of society that doesn't want to understand science, doesn't care about science. They don't want to put deep thought into things. They just want to know that they're being taken care of and they're being looked after. And there's a certain level of comfort in the rituals of religion. So the religion disappeared and then came back in a new format in this story.
I'm excited for you to finish this.
Yeah, I've been watching your stream on Twitch for a while as you've been writing this. When you were talking about you had an idea in the shower, I thought you were saying, I wonder how aliens would taste.
Well, I have eaten. I am one of those people. If you name something, I've probably tried it at some point. There's a few things that I haven't hit, like century eggs. I'm looking at those. There is a spot I found in my city that I can buy them though.
What are century eggs?
So century eggs are eggs. They're black and rubbery and have a very strong scent. And it's a Asian delicacy where the egg is put into salt and other ingredients, and it's left to kind of cook within these ingredients over not 100 years, but over a long period of time, over several years. I actually need to get working on my book. That's the problem, is there's so many things that I need to just sit down and I've been trying to write my book on stream, but 1 or 2 days a week is not enough time to put into a novel to get it done. So I need to actually do some behind the scenes work and also keep things a little bit surprising for people. But I do like to do things on stream. Like I've already taken my story and looked at the action adventure plot line and made sure and checked to see if I was hitting the right plot points along the way. And it turned out I was able to, let me rephrase that, I was able to naturally hit those points without thinking about them. They kind of flowed in to that. And that actually brings us up to our book of the month. The book of the month that we've got going on, we will be doing a book of the month each time that we do one of these panels. And this book of the month that Ted is currently showing on stream is The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. This is a longer book. It's actually very fascinating when you get into it. You can tell it's when it was written. There's some of the verbiage, some of the language and things like that are a little bit older.
First sentence.
For those of you that are not aware of this, the first sentence that LJ is referring to is, whether we listen with aloof amusement to the dreamlike mumbo jumbo of some red-eyed witch doctor of the Congo, or read with cultivated rapture thin translations from the sonnets of the mysteries of Lao Tzu, now and again crack the hard nutshell of an argument of Aquinas, or catch suddenly the shining meaning of a bizarre Eskimo fairy tale. It will be the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story that we find, together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told.
It ends strongly.
It does end strongly, but it does end very much a product of its own time.
But this was written, I think he wrote this in what, the 50s? The first one?
9, I think, is when it was published.
But it is a fascinating book in that it does cover the monomyth, and it also discusses, speaking about religion, it does also cover religion and how basically what ended up with this is Joseph Campbell studied stories, mythologies, religions, fables, all these different things and traditions of cultures all over the world for many years, and realized they all kind of had a similar theme, and that was what he related to with the monomyth. And it's a circular cycle that goes through, which is kind of the grandfather of the hero's journey. So if you are a writer, this is definitely a must-read book. It is great for understanding your craft, for understanding storytelling throughout life and history. Every time I've been driving my wife nuts because I keep stopping and being like, oh, you have to hear how it describes this. I find just the descriptions are absolutely gorgeous. Like where he talks about how all of life is contained within the egg of a flea and the entire taste of the ocean is contained in one drop. And it's just beautiful metaphors and similes that he has in there. But this is an important book to read, at least pages 41 to 205, I believe it is, because our next panel will be discussing the hero's journey. And this is a good book to have some background in the hero's journey and how we got to that section.
And how important, as you said, it is to know what the hero's journey is, particularly when you're writing a novel. Even for short stories or a children's book too, it's that you need to know what that is so that you can write it effectively or break it effectively.
That's exactly it. You need to know what the rules are to know what you're breaking in order to have it be effective. And that's something that I find with this is that once you understand the basic principles, and to me, it's been fascinating to just see how different religions, different faiths, different cultures have had a very similar pattern going through, which is the hero's journey. And that's what I was saying when I looked at the action adventure plot outline for the Line of Archinomas. When I said I naturally hit those plot points, it's because I know and understand, and I'm still learning, but I have a certain level of knowledge and understanding of this. So when I'm writing the story, there's a certain flow that I get into. And that happens, it's not at 10%, at 20%, at 30%, these things have to happen, but generally within those blocks, with between 8% and 12% of the story, this, the inciting incident should be occurring. And when you understand what it works, and not only what, but why it works and how it carries you forward is fantastic.
I mean, as you mentioned, like applying to kids' books, I think when we talk about kids books, there's so many, I wouldn't say subgenres, but I think as you get into the older versions of it, like the chapter books, I could see that being applied, or mid-grade novels, or even YA, especially YA, right? Those themes definitely can go hand in hand. But beyond that, I've been reading a lot to my son, over the last 6 years. And I guess it depends on the story, right?
When I say it's the grandfather of storytelling, just looking at one aspect of it, where in a story, it's circular. We start with the ordinary world. There's something that displeases the protagonist about it. They go off to do something to change it. They learn stuff, they get stuff, they find stuff, they defeat antagonists, and they transform, and they come back different, back to their ordinary world in a different manner. This factors in across the board. If you're looking at a romance, it's the same thing as someone who believes they can't find love, or they're not worthy of love, and then something happens to force them out of that mold. They learn along the way, and then they come back to their ordinary world with a new perspective of, oh, you know what, I am lovable, and maybe not everybody in the opposite sex is a terrible person. But there is still that transformation aspect of it, and circular coming back to the ordinary world with a new perspective. And it's the same thing with romantic comedies, with action adventure, with thrillers. There's a transformation that goes on through the protagonist as you go through.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that is only applicable to fantasy or to sci-fi, even though certainly I think some of the greatest examples, or some of the easiest examples to spot that hero's journey, are in sci-fi and fantasy. Like all the Star Wars stuff in The Two Offices here as the clearest example of a hero's journey.
There is just something nice about a circular cycle to a story. And even thinking back to the kids' books that I've written, it's the same thing with the one, Tiny Teddy, which is a story about a small spider who's always teased by his siblings and wants to prove himself to them. There ends up being a food crisis, and he goes out to try to save the day for the food crisis. And when he's out doing that, he finally gets his growth spurt and can't come back home. And he realizes along the way that he doesn't need going out and trying to do something dangerous to win the approval of his siblings was kind of a silly thing to do, even though it did pay off in the end. It was very dangerous. So he is bigger at the end of the story, and he has a better understanding of what respect from siblings is and what's worth risking to get to there.
What category was that kind of broken into? Was it a picture book?
So the way I write, I like to, especially for kids, I like to include words that are very big and not very big, but bigger words, and make it a little more difficult, because I remember, I remember growing up and having looked like that's a conversation started with my parents. Like, oh, what does that word mean? And, you're learning. And so this one was designed to be read by kids and to be read by parents to the children. But it is more of a picture book. So I'm currently in the works of having it illustrated, setting it up to be illustrated fully. My other book, The Big Deep, is more of a YA, and has a big twist in it. And it's about a main character named Ishmael who is trying to save his partner, who he thinks is he wakes up because there's an earthquake and there's stuff happening where they are, and his partner's not there, and he goes off trying to find her. And the big twist in that one is that because this is a fast-paced action adventure where he's going through and the tunnels are collapsing and all this stuff is going on around them. Turns out that the characters you find at the end are actually moles, because even my kids' book have to have a twist in them.
I like how the dynamics between the three of us are really, as far as where we are in our writing journey, right, in our Scribe's journey. Travis, you have a number of books that you've self-published. LJ, I think that might be your first book, right, that you self-published. I'm in the process of doing my first book, right? So I have nothing published. So we're all at different stages in our Scribe's journey. I'm doing air quotes. No one can see that, but it's fine. So it's always interesting hearing your experiences and, LJ, your experiences as well as this. So as I throw a random tangent right in there, because that's what I do, being odd as I am. Yes, thank you. There we go.
Well, and I enjoy that there's a difference in genres as well.
Right.
We kind of, I think, hit most of the bases, particularly because of Travis being able to, since he's written in so many different types, but there's some experience, at least for anyone who is listening. Depending on what they want to write, they should be able to get something out of this. And I think that I love the fact that you guys have worked on and written kids' books, because that is something I eventually would like to do, as I have young nephews. But right now, it's definitely no, you cannot read anything Auntie LJ writes. Those are questions that I don't need to have their parents doing the excuse you. They can't know about torture yet. They're two.
No, I get that. One of the things that we let my son do is listen to audiobooks. And Travis, you were saying how you use larger words, and a lot of these authors who are writing these mid-grade novels that we're letting him listen to, even classics like the Narnia series, right? He loves pretty much every book in that series, but then there's words that he comes back and he's like, what is this? But yeah, you gotta keep it clean for kids. No torture, no torture.
But I think that never goes away. Like, I still read books with, like, it's funny, but I've actually got a dictionary beside me, and my wife has one beside her side of the bed as well. And yes, you can look things up really quickly online, but I'm still to this point where I'm reading a book and I look at something and I don't know what a certain word is. So I put the book down, I pull out the dictionary. I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I kind of like, it's my little word of the day thing that happens to go through. And The Hero with a Thousand Faces can definitely do that for you. That's one thing I will say. It is a bit the first 3 chapters are a bit of a slog. In the sense that they're written in very high level kind of academic talk. And then once they get into the actual breakdown of the journeys and things like that and how these structures work, it becomes a little more accessible. But it is very academic and kind of dry for the first 3 chapters.
See, we're slogging through it so that other people don't have to. We can be, I think, the Cliff Notes and the Coles Notes.
Ooh, I like how that. I like you put that. Yeah.
That's exactly it. And that's something that I think is important to be able to have the added vocabulary and the thing, like when you're putting the stuff in, I find books need to be a point of conversation. You don't want to just have someone pick up your book, read it, and say, oh, that was pretty cool, and put it down and walk away and not talk about it again. You want one to have them jump up and down and be like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever read, and then go hit their friends over the head with it and say, you have to read this. But the other thing too is to have the book like The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where they're going to touch the person next to them and be like, hey, listen, you have to hear this. This is so well written. This is so well done. Like, one thing that drives me wild is when people watch movies and television series and they say that, like, I absolutely love this, my favorite character quote is this, and when this character said this thing, it really moved me and it really changed my life and it was this amazing thing. And it's amazing how these quotes are attributed to the character, but there's an author behind that put that quote together. Right? Yeah, or a writer.
And just as a sub note, I don't think we're promoting anybody hit each other with this book, because this book is quite heavy, actually. I mean, you might actually do some damage hitting someone with this. It is quite. It was like 400 pages, right?
I was gonna say it's only 400 pages, but it's dense.
It's thick.
It is hefty.
Yeah, don't hit people with books.
Like educating people and making them, have to look things up. That was one of the things I really wanted to do with my book series, in part because of the fact that I am taking and being inspired by these different cultures. That I want it to be a book where Western readers are going to pick it up and have to do I don't actually know what a kaftan is, or what a niqab is, or any of these things that we're not very familiar with, and make them look it up and be exposed to a culture and often a religion even that has been so villainized in the West, and to have it be it's really not that scary when a woman is walking down the street in hijab and whatnot, and bring in a little more familiarity for them, so that we have books that are opening people's minds to so much more and using fiction to educate for real world matters as well.
I'm part of this writers cafe, and I was actually contacted by one of the young African-American writer who's only ever written romance. And he told me, he's like, look, I have this idea for this science fiction, movie. And we sat down, and all he wants to do is challenge, like you said, everybody's opinions and everybody's knowledge on the African culture. And everything that we created within this outline for these 4 scripts that we're writing, right? We have an outline for the first movie. We're in the process of writing it. Just going to try to challenge people's minds on view of African culture, African lore, dance moves, everything, right? So the more things that are out there that challenge it, it makes it easier for people to understand what they don't know, right? And I think that's what really causes some of the things in the world. Challenging things like that is definitely the way to go, right? You have to. And I have not picked up your book yet either. I need to do that. So shame on me. I know, seriously.
That's it. But no, but it is very important to challenge and because I think as writers, we have a certain, not obligation or duty, but the opportunity to affect real change. and how we do things, and the open, because I know a lot of my perspectives and points of view in life have been changed through reading books. There's one I absolutely love. I'm blanking on the author's name right now, so I'm not going to bring it up, but I think it's On the Suffering of Others was the name of it, and it was just a wonderful book. But I'd have to look that up. But one thing I try to do too, just to wrap up this one little bit, is I also, as much as you want to have people read and look at other things, you also don't want people putting your book down all the time, right? Like that's you don't want to pull people out of your books. You don't want to be throwing constant heavy hitting words at them. So that's one thing I'm doing with my novel, The Line of Archinomus, is these are aliens from another planet. And I am introducing some of their language subtly throughout the book by using analogies and using turns of phrase that are common in the human world. So there's, in one scene, the main character is talking about how he really doesn't like this guy or thinking about how he really doesn't like this guy that's coming up to talk to him. And in it, I say that it's not that he has a croon to grind against this guy. He just doesn't know when to stop talking. So most people are going to know the saying, it's not that he has an axe to grind against this person. So that's one of the ways that I'm trying to insert foreign language into this, is by using certain words in common English dialect.
Context is so important. So important. Because as you said, you really don't want people just putting your book down every 2 seconds or having to go to your appendices every 2 seconds to do the crap. What was that again?
Yeah, that's what I found with the Wheel of Time series. For the first couple of books in the Wheel of Time series, and if you took time away from reading the series and came back, because Robert Jordan created his entire language and different verbiage and all these things for it, and there's at certain points there's a lot of flipping to the back to see what this meant again and tying things back in together. So it was a lot of research as you're going through. And the fact that it took a year or two for each book to come out, generally for the first 20 pages or the first several chapters of a new book, you were trying to refresh yourself on what was happening. So our next panel and podcast is going to be the hero's journey, and we're going to be discussing Joseph Campbell, and we're going to have another book of the month for you. But this is the Scribe's journey. We're hitting the ground running with this stuff, so there is going to be a lot of very exciting stuff coming up. So things to look out for. We just have to launch. The Scribe's Journey website, Twitter page, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, Discord, all of these things will be coming out. So this is going to be a full-fledged experience where you'll be able to immerse yourself, ask questions, and jump in on things, and stay in touch with us when we're not doing the panel. So to that end, this is the end of the podcast section of the Scribe's Journey with the Three Scribes. We will be staying around to answer some questions and continue the conversation off podcast. So if you are interested in seeing this podcast recorded live, come check us out. All of this information will be made available on the website and all of our social media channels and things that we have set up as well. So for this point, I would like to thank my fellow scribes for being here tonight. And does anyone have any final things to say before we wrap up the podcast section of this?
I am excited for the continued journey.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is it's going to be a real fun journey. Can't wait to see what happens in the future.
And I could not agree more with that sentiment. But the Scribe's Journey isn't just about our journey. It's about your journey as well, as writers and authors and aspiring writers out there. This is being built out to help everybody, us and you included, in expanding your writing career and become better writers. So thank you all for joining us. Now that we're done, go sharpen your quill and get back to writing.